Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now a question that comes up intermittently is whether or not I would change how I paint things over time, whether there's been new releases for things or I just discover a new technique, and the short answer is yes, sometimes. So today what I'm going to do is tackle an Iron Hands Lieutenant. This fella I have done Iron Hands on the channel a couple of ways before, one for the Heresy and one for quote-unquote modern 40k. But this guy I'm going to touch on slightly differently, so you might spot one or two different things along the way that you might find helpful. All of the paints for this one will be listed in the description below, so nice and quick, let's get started. So this fella, he is one of the Space Marine Lieutenant blister packs, and I've added a couple of bits from the Iron Hands upgrade sprue just to give him a little bit more character. I really love the posing on this one. I know that it's kind of a joke how many Space Marine Lieutenants there are, but this guy's cool, and I've wanted to paint this miniature for a while, so I'm going to. Now once he's assembled, first thing to do of course is to prime him, and here I've used matte black from the Army Painter. It honestly does not matter which black you use, because we're going to cover this over with a dozen other things, but that's what I've got, and it works just fine. So first off, let me introduce you to our secret weapon. This is black from the VALLEJO Metallic Model Air range. Now, there's a few ways that you can get a metallic black. You can mix it up yourself. It's really, it's much of much. But this is just the easiest way I've ever found. It's metallic black from the pot. As you can see, I am not being careful at all about how this is going on, because once it's dried, this is going to be the base color for all of the armor. And it will also work pretty well for anything which is going to be a lighter silver over top. So big old brush, just go nuts with it. Cover over all of the armor at least. All right, there we are. We're all finished. Pack it up. What I'm going to do might be kind of a surprise, because I'm actually now going to take him outside and varnish him. The Model Air range has quite a long cure time until it's fixed properly. Now I can paint over the top of this quite safely, but if I were to wash it in the next couple of hours while I'm working, I have in the past had little bits of metallic flake pick up and move through the wash. Now obviously, depending on what paint you use, that probably won't be a problem. Cobalt metal from the Army Painter, for example, is very similar to this, just a tiny touch of blue, but this is the black that I wanted to use, so to stop it from lifting, I'm going to varnish this guy before moving on to any of the other steps. Bit of an odd one, but I would say a necessity in this case. So that satin varnish, it does have a bit of shine to it, but from a distance he'll look almost grey. Nothing to worry about. We are going to fix that as we finish him off, but for now that's easier to work with. What I'm going to start with might be a surprise. I have here Mephiston Red, because there are a few bits that I want to paint white, and I want to put some white over the red, so having a think about the order in which you do things can help ordinarily save some time without having to go back and forth over your steps. So I'm going to paint in this little tabard bit. We'll probably need a second coat once this first one is dried. Now 2 coats later, I've got a nice smooth red there. What I'm going to do is turn him sideways, and I've got here, this is silver grey from VALLEJO. What I'm going to do is start just drawing a line across this little tabard here. And I'm not too worried if it's not perfect straight away, because I've still got my red on the palette. I can tidy that up, and I am relying on doing that, to be honest. So I'm going to lay down first of all my white stripe. And that is going to be much thicker than I want it to eventually be. But while I've got my white base coat out here, I'm going to paint in the other white bits. So the little hands and what have you on his armor. I'm going to paint in the casing on his plasma pistol, and I'm also going to lay down some white over the exposed skin. Now it's not going to be this color when we're finished, but it will make it much easier to paint that really light, sickly skin tone that I want. Now that not quite white will take 1 or 2 coats, but it looks pretty good once it's on. So with some fresh Mephiston Red, what I'm going to do is line up with the center fold here and start painting in little chips. Now, if you are more patient than I am, that sawtooth design, you can actually get quite intricate with it, but I think that's enough to add just a little bit of visual interest to the front there. Now, what I'm going to paint in are a couple of the metallic details, and I'm going to do them in two different ways. First off, I have here Gunmetal from the Army Painter. Now, this is quite dark. It's not going to look dark against the black that we've used, but it's quite a dark gunmetal color, funnily enough. But all of the functional, like working metallic parts, I'm going to base coat with this. And then for any decorative silver parts, I have plate mail metal. So it's chest eagle, little shiny bits. We'll do this. Now his arm, this bionic arm here, I'm going to paint in his hand using this plate mail metal because I want his hand to look like, you know, Iron Hands take it seriously. It's going to be nice and shiny. Now we're starting to get somewhere. Breaking up that black, he starts to look a little more interesting. What I have here now, this is weapon bronze, and any other parts on him that I want to be a brassy sort of color, I'm going to base coat with this now. You could also use Balthazar gold if you want to stick to Citadel products, but this I like because it's a little bit lighter, but without being as bright as what's the other? Liberator Gold? Retributor Armor, that's the one. Now after two coats on each of those areas, we've got a nice warm bronze color. What I've got now, this is Arctic Gem from the Army Painter. Any nice, vibrant blue will do the job here. What I'm going to do is paint in this little gem on his knee. And I'll quickly pop up here. I'm also going to do in the cable on his head with this. Now the plasma coils I am going to do in a different way, but they are going to be blue as well. Reason being, what I'm doing is creating a couple of little closed triangles from the front here. So his leg, his head, and his gun casing will be this little splash of bright color. In a similar way, how the red is, and from the front, at least in a little sense, so is our bronze. Now the next couple of colors I am going to gloss through quite quickly. I'm going to use Oak Brown from the Army Painter on all of his leather details. On any bits of parchment that are visible, like purity seals, we'll use a little bit of Ancient Stone. Then on the waxy bits of the purity seals, I'm using here, this is Basilisk Red. This is a almost purplish sort of color, which I quite like. Something that isn't so straight red as what you've used on the rest of the miniature. Looks cool. Now that should be all of my base coats done. I've got just a little bit of that metallic black again, and I'm going to straighten up some of my details here. Don't worry about this not being varnished. This is not going to It's not going to be enough to really affect the finish here. With all of those base coats done and a little bit of tidy up finished, I'm going to pop them aside and I'm going to mix up my shade. Now this is somewhere that the Army Painter's little extra palette thing comes in really handy. So what I'm going to make, I've got here dark tone, and I'm going to add 1, 2, 3 drops of that with 1 drop of strong tone. Boop. So there's 4 drops of wash, and I'm now going to add 4 drops of Speedpaint medium. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, strictly speaking, you could just use straight dark tone and thin it out a bit, but I would suggest here that it's going to look just a little bit better with the tiniest bit of brown in there to break up that blackness. So give it a good mix. And then we'll apply this over our entire miniature. So making sure that we are getting it into all of the recesses, spend a bit of time working it into the little nooks and crannies, and yeah, bathe all of them in this. When it comes up onto his skin here, for example, I'm going to give him a quick wipe over, just to get a bit of shading, and then wipe most of it away with my brush. Otherwise, let's drench him in the stuff. We'll give him then about half an hour in the sun to dry, and we'll see what we get then. Now once that has dried, we have got plenty of shading. The black now looks much more black, and yeah, he's just more interesting to look at. There are a couple of highlights that I want to do, nothing too strenuous, but I'm going to start first of all. I've mixed up here some Peachy flesh with Speedpaint medium. Half and half to this, because I do not want it to cover terribly well. What I'll do is tilt him to the side here, and I'm just going to apply this over his skin. That little bit of black wash that we did on his skin to begin with is going to help this look unwell. Now once that has dried, if you want to highlight his skin any, I've got some Pallid Wych flesh here. And I'm not going to do very much of this. All I'm going to do is probably straighten out his brow a little bit. And yeah, Pallid Wych flesh is wonderful because it's not the skin tone of a well boy. And if you want to make him look fabulously unwell, what I've got is 1 dot of Periwinkle purple speed paint with 7 dots of speed paint medium, because I do not want this to cover very well at all. What I'm going to do is just drop that into his eye socket, a little over the brow, just anywhere that that awful pallid complexion that's quite subtle on camera and in reality as well. It is reminiscent of Darth Vader's skin tone. It's proper. Oh, it's yuck. Anyway. So what I've got here is some Tidal Wave. This is one of the speed paint blues, and there isn't really a correct answer here. Any color that you like will do just fine. Just paint that over the plasma coils. I've also popped a wee splash of that over the blue gems and the wire in the side of his head from earlier. Once that has dried, grab some white, and now we can highlight our white details. The other thing I'm going to do is just some tiny wee blips of white on the edges of the coils. Now, highlighting the decorative silver parts, remembering that we've split up those into 2 different colors. I have here Mithril from the Army Painter, and we're going to bop just a few little bits of this onto the corners. I think you'll see on his Power Fist that I did go over both the functional and decorative bits of silver with that Mithril, and I don't think you need to swap. But here what I have is some fresh gunmetal. What I'm going to do is just catch the edges of the black armor, give that a bit of a shine. And anywhere that you're worried you might not get a straight line, what you can do is just tickle it along with your brush, and don't worry if it isn't straight. You can add as much or as little of this as you like as a result. The last of the metallic highlights I'm going to apply, this is True Brass, and it is one of my favorite new colors from the Army Painter Fanatic range. It's a wonderful true brassy color. It's a little bit lighter than Liberated Gold by contrast, so you can use that instead if you fancy, but I really like how this one looks. Now I have quickly hit the leather with some leather brown to highlight and some Wyvern Fury on the wax. But there is one last thing I want to add to just a few bits of the working metal, because some folks, you'll see them attack the Iron Hands with a bunch of rusty stuff, and it doesn't feel quite right. But a little bit of military shader here, mixed up half and half with some speed paint medium. It's going to give a little bit of that oiliness in the recesses that I think is appropriate for these guys. Even, cared for machinery is going to have a bit of greasiness to it. So once I'm satisfied with this, what I'm going to do is take him outside. I will hit him with another spray of varnish just to seal all of this. And then, yeah, he'll be good to go. And the last thing I do after that will be to gloss varnish a little bit of plasma coil there. And yeah, should be good to go after that point. I'll base him up. Recipe for that will be in the description. Let's get a look at our Iron Hand when he is all finished. And so there at last, our Iron Hands Lieutenant is complete. And I really enjoyed painting him. I always do. Space Marines are one of those, I don't know, guilty pleasure doesn't seem like quite the right way of putting it, but yeah, it's fun just to go back to something you know really well. So there were 1 or 2 things I've done differently there, 1 or 2 little extra tips which I don't think I covered in the first Iron Hands video I did, so hopefully something there was interesting to you. So as always, thank you very much to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as all of my wonderful patrons who are keeping me ticking in paints and glue. including my gorgeous producers who are showing up on screen now. Your support literally keeps this channel going, folks. Now, any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the old comment box below. My Twitter and Instagram are both linked there too. So, thank you very much for your time, one and all, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.